Hey everyone, as I promised in the last video, I am posting this one to give an overview of where we're headed this next week. This week is the second half of Unit 4 in our Intro to Historical Study class. A couple of things that I want to apologize about. First, just that I've meant to have Unit 5 already open and ready for you, for those of you who have been working ahead. That just hasn't happened yet, and so again, my apologies. I am working on it. It's in progress. Once it's finished, I will post it in the unit narratives, and I will build out the what I build out of learning modules in C&M Learn, so that you'll have access to that. In Unit 5, and importantly next week, we'll be talking about primary sources. So we're looking this week, these 2 weeks in Unit 4, at secondary sources and thinking about how historians use primary materials from the past to construct historical narratives and arguments. We're thinking about how to ask questions of those and evaluate their credibility, their relevance, the strength of their interpretations, and so on. And so that's what we're doing this week. Next week, we'll be looking more specifically at primary evidence itself. So different kinds of primary sources, what kinds of questions to ask of those, and why those questions might differ than the kinds of questions we ask of secondary sources. As you'll notice with the way I'm laying this out, primary and secondary source evaluation goes hand in hand. Those two things go together. It's kind of hard to separate them out, even though we're doing that just for the sake of recognizing distinct source types in history, as well as recognizing the different kinds of questions we'll want to ask of them. All of that to say, I've pointed out an optional Zoom meet that will take place next Wednesday, October 14th, from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. That's with Thomas Jan, who is the director of the Center for Southwest Research at UNM. That's essentially their archive. So he's going to talk to us about archives and about primary sources and the work that he does and his staff does as archivists. Because he's taking time out to meet with us, I really strongly encourage you to attend this one if you can. I do recognize that some of you just won't be able to make it at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, but if you can, please attend. It will be offered as an extra mile activity, meaning you get a little extra credit for it for class. But I'm very excited that he was willing to take time to talk with our class about historical sources via Zoom. So please mark that in your calendar if you haven't yet done so. Looking to what we're doing this week then and what we'll be due by next Sunday, it's all hypothesis annotation work, once again. So you can either choose to read an article by Van Hastings Gardner. It's a little bit old, but I discuss why I chose it in the unit narrative, so please read through that. Or you can read an article that I published in 2014 about Columbus, New Mexico, which was the site of Pancho Villa's raid on American soil during the Mexican Revolution in 1916. So I've outlined the different reasons that I chose those two. Essentially, I chose Gardner because he does a really good job of explaining how his work fits into the existing, at that time, historiography on the Pueblo Revolt. My work, it uses a specific conceptual framework borrowed from geographers. And so I wanted you to think about how different theories, conceptual frameworks, or ideas help historians to make interpretations of past events, and how we should maybe judge those. How effective can they be? Something my dissertation advisor, my doctoral advisor once said about theory is that it's good if it provides insights. If not, we could leave it. And so I say that because historians tend to be perhaps the least theoretical of social scientists. Indeed, as I've mentioned in a couple of comments here and there in our class, there's a debate within the discipline of history about whether or not history is a social science or if it fits into the humanities. I tend to fall on the humanities side of the aisle, although in my article I used a social science conceptual framework to make sense of some things that were going on in Columbus, New Mexico around the turn of the 20th century. So again, all that to just sort of throw that out there for you to grapple with, and you can decide whether to read mine or Gardner's. Either way's fine, whatever you're into. Everyone will be listening to and reading well, I don't know if the transcript's actually available for it, but reading the show notes for the Throughline, one episode of the Throughline podcast. That's an NPR podcast in which they look at historical events to try to make sense of things that are happening currently. And so we're going to be reading one about bananas, and of course well, not of course, but you're probably getting used to this from me. It relates to Central American history. That's a big area of study for me right now, as well as the borderlands with Mexico and the U.S. So just by virtue of that, that's where a lot of our readings sort of gravitate. Again, something to think about. You should also be asking questions of the class, the way that I've decided to organize things and present things to you. I'd love it if you asked questions and made notes via Medium on our class, on the unit narratives and elsewhere. So I know a couple of you have done some highlighting and posted some questions early on, but please continue to feel free to do that. I read all of those. I try to respond to them. So that's just another way that we can, kind of take our learning to another level, or a different approach, I guess, different perspective. All right, so I'll let it go at that. But again, this week we're looking at two hypothesis annotations, one on the article of your choosing, either Gardner or my own, and then the second one on the Throughline podcast on bananas. All right, I hope you have a good week. Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions or anything that you might need help with. I'm around and I'm happy to help.